The Narrows mass murder demolition project, called the Halifax explosion today December 6th, is a day of mourning for all Lun. The reason for this day of mourning is the most heavily suppressed secret in Canadian history. The following are direct excerpts lifted from halifaxpubliclibraries.ca. They tell the very incriminating story of the events leading up to the largest mass murder demolition project of Indigenous people in history. Though Lund survivors have always maintained that this event, dubbed the Halifax explosion, was a coordinated governmental effort to steal our land, Canada has never admitted to as much. This is why I submit these unedited records from their perspective for your personal analysis. The camp was near the part of the harbor called the Narrows, or Quebec, which is aptly named as the distance across the water between Halifax and Dartmouth is at certain points only half a kilometer wide. As part of their takeover of Nova Scotia, the English government began a campaign to entice settlers from Britain, Ireland, Germany, France, and other European nations to come to Canada with promises of free land and goods. The property in and around Halifax was divided into lots to be given to incoming citizens. As immigrants arrived, the local Mi'kmaq encampments were displaced and ultimately disappeared. Turtle Grove, however, remained. Over time, some Mi'kmaq families chose to make Turtle Grove their permanent home, and it eventually became the last of the Mi'kmaq settlements within the city or near its borders. Several Mi'kmaq families lived there, using traditional wigwams for shelter during the fair weather months, and switching to simple wooden structures in the winter. The city of Dartmouth took a little more time to get going compared to its Halifax counterpart. As of 1766, there were a mere 39 people living in the town, 31 adults and 8 children. In his book, In the Wake of the Alderney, opens a new window, Harry Chapman states, Dartmouth was virtually a ghost town and would remain so for another 2 decades before the whalers and loyalists would arrive to breathe new life into the town. In 1790, Gershom Tufts, a carpenter by trade, received a grant of land from the British Crown of approximately 1,000 acres on the Dartmouth side of the harbor. From that point forward, the area was known as Tufts Cove or Nipamkatic. The land grant included Turtle Grove. Though the area was now considered private property, the Mi'kmaq continued to live on the land as they always had. In the eyes of the property owners and the government, this made the Mi'kmaq trespassers and Turtle Grove became a point of contention. The debate over the Mi'kmaq encampment continued for decades, even as the properties were divided and changed ownership. In another of Harry Chapman's books titled The Halifax Harbor Explosion, Dartmouth's Day of Sorrow opens a new window, the author makes note of a specific dispute. Vincent Farrell, a prominent Dartmouth businessman, wrote to the Department of Indian Affairs in 1905 complaining to the federal government that the native people at Turtle Grove were squatting on his sister's land and he wanted them relocated. The native community lived with constant harassment and threats of expulsion and relocation from both the Farrell family and the federal government. This letter acted as a catalyst that began several years of negotiation between the Department of Indian Affairs and the Mi'kmaq to find them a new place to live. In 1912, a piece of property referred to as the Old Quarantine Grounds, which was only a short distance away from Turtle Grove, was offered by the government as a possible alternative. The Mi'kmaq accepted the offer, but it was later rescinded when the citizens in Tufts Cove complained. The government also made efforts to try and purchase Turtle Grove from the Farrell family, but could not afford the $20,000 they were asking for it. In 1916, there was a breakthrough. The Tufts family offered the government a 94.5-acre plot near Albro Lake. Though the Tufts had been opposed to the Mi'kmaq moving to the Old Quarantine Grounds, this new proposal appeared to be a reasonable alternative. The land would be designated as a reserve, which would mean the government would fund medical supplies and housing. They also offered $2,500 to aid with moving expenses for the families. The Mi'kmaq accepted. The transition to the new land was meant to begin immediately, but as December of 1917 approached, the move had not yet started. Now that you have their official version of events, leading up to December 6, 1917, there are a few caveats I will add for historical context. Number 1. The designation Mi'kmaq, given to the loon, is a misnomer which the Canadian government labeled the loon with in 1676. Its first documented use is from French investor and politician Charles Aubert de la Chesnaye. It is, however, not the name we indigenous gave ourselves or have responded to for the over 13,000 years of our agreed-upon existence. The term loon is. Number 2. When it is said that in 1766 only 39 people lived in the town, this is not an accurate reflection of Kipke's population, as at the time the racist notion was that the soulless savages were not human and thus were not to be counted. Only the European immigrants were acknowledged as constituents of North Quebec, properly called Nai Paimkatic. Additionally, maps of the region identifying Quebec, or the Narrows, constituted both the north and south sides of the harbor, including the region later dubbed Africville. At the point at which the explosion happened, a minimum of 2,000 are acknowledged to have been killed, nearly all Loon, though this is certainly an underestimation based on the number of homes accounted for in the region, which is not to be confused with the number of families in said homes. Number 3. The inconsistent, inaccurate references to the town of Nai Paimkatic as an encampment are intended to be insulting and belittling, and however are patently untrue. Observations of the site wreckage alone are enough to display how false that description is. These steel beams and grand dome structures obliterate the squalor wigwam conditions the word encampment implies. Number 4. The final paragraph of this account appears to be a complete fabrication. My research has wielded no such agreement between the Loon and any level of the illegitimate Canadian government agreeing to the willing relocation of the Loon people anywhere. If any such document exists, and I doubt that it does, it is for all intent and purposes restricted from the public archives.